Dmitry here from Just Reach Out, and Mayur Gupta from Spotify. VP of Growth. We're both speaking at the Growth Marketing Conference, and I decided why not sit down with Mayur and just talk about growth, marketing, acquiring users, retention rates, and all that fun stuff that speakers will be talking about. So, Mayur, thanks for coming out, flying all the way to New York, and sitting down with me here and just chatting about stuff that matters to all of us here.
Thanks for having me, Dmitry. Excited.
So, you're an investor, right? You know, you've invested in companies, you advise companies. Aside from your work, at Spotify, VP of Growth there, a lot of the companies that are at Growth Marketing Conference, who will be coming to Growth Marketing Conference and listening to speakers talk, they want to figure out how to acquire customers, how to retain them, how to get more value out of them, right? And they're young companies. Some of these are not huge companies. I mean, the speaker list, you have the Sean Ellis, you got Pinterest, you have all these big name speakers, and they all have their own tactic that they're going to be presenting, and there's going to be a lesson learned there. And most of the people who attend this conference, I've spoken there many times, they're marketers. They're trying to figure out how to acquire the next 100 customers and how to lower their cost of acquisition. And a lot of times, they're trying to figure out, which route do I take? Should I focus on conversion rate optimization that this one speaker spoke about? Or should I do this content marketing play that this other person talked about? Or perhaps I should do ads, or maybe SEO, or podcasts are really hot right now. And balancing all that is really tough for a lot of mid-sized companies and even, bigger ones. So how do you think about that? How do you really make sense of it, picking the right channels, and choosing how to acquire customers?
Yeah. It's quite interesting the way you laid it out, Dmitry, because I think there are a lot of answers in your question itself. And no matter how much any one of us has gone through, our own entrepreneurial route or experiences at companies, brilliant companies like, of course, Spotify and many others, I don't know there's a single answer to any of that. If there had been, then all investments will turn into 100x, and every single startup will become a huge Apple or a Spotify story. But I think the 2 points that you made, I feel, which are typical, the most common pitfalls that I've seen in my experience with startups. One is their understanding and realization of the fact that they've reached or haven't reached product market fit. I think every founder believes that they've reached a product market fit when they actually haven't. They aren't even close to that, and I think that's the biggest fallacy for them. And a lot of it is also because they haven't more quantitatively define how to measure product market fit. And there is no single definition for it. But every time I speak to a young founder, I tell them, come up with your own definition of what will tell you that you've, somewhat sort of hit that big milestone. And I kind of define that in 4 very simple pillars for any startup. One is, a level of top line growth. So a certain amount of user base that you have acquired. So that's one very quantitatively measurable KPI for you to say, yes, 20% or 25% of my product market fit accomplished. Second is very important is the retention rate, because we all know, for whatever role we may have played in growth, that without that, it's a leaky bucket. And until that graph starts to stabilize, you haven't really gotten close to having a product market fit. So that's the second. Third is, what is the kind of engagement that your customers are actually having with your platform? So depending on the business you're in, whether that is product engagement itself, if it's an offline product, or it's a MAU to DAU ratio, and how many monthly active users are actually using the platform on a daily basis, and so on. And fourth, which I think is very, very important also, is there's so many different ways of measuring it, whether you call it NPS or brand love, or how much organic growth you're really getting, which in my, from my standpoint, I look at how much of those existing customers are really bringing other customers, purely through word of mouth. So to me, these are 4 kind of reasonable indicators that tell you that, yes, you built a brilliant product in the right market, And now it's a question of scaling. So that's one aspect where I feel most and many startups struggle. And the other one, which you sort of hinted in your question itself, is the biggest challenge is not as much the decisions you make on things you want to do, but more importantly, the decisions you make on the things you don't want to do. So more than what you prioritize, the choice of what you deprioritize. And that applies in terms of the audience you're building the product for. Because when I talk to some of the founders, I'll ask them, so who's your target audience? Who's your core audience? And if you hear the response, the millennials, you know that is, you're already in the wrong direction, because that's far too broad. And it's a tough choice as a founder, because you want to meet all those needs. And it gets tougher, especially in your early startup phase, when you start to get semblances and customers representing all those segments. You don't want to say no to anyone, right? You want to keep acquiring. And then you get into this dilemma where you start to orchestrate your product based on everybody's needs. And that is, those are the kind of tough decisions that you have to make. Same way in terms of the channels you want to leverage to acquire users. When you're early on, you want to unleash every single channel possible. Only until you realize that, you've been bleeding so much that you're better off in your early startup phase, in a way, to focus on one most primary channel to bring the user, get to the product market fit, then unleash other touch points and channels to bring.
Do you have tricks on figuring out the product market fit itself for a founder, and specific levels of when a founder has defined it and actually is 100% there, or maybe 80% or 50%? Because for me, I know Just Reach Out, we do PR software, right? We help you pitch journalists. And so when I first had the idea, the first thing I did is boom, I'm going to charge people for my idea in order to actually build this thing, right? So I'm coding this thing up, but people prepaid it just like they do for airlines, $10, $15, $20, whatever. I didn't know how much to charge for it. This thing wasn't even working yet. And I was for me, I wanted a signal, will people pay for a chance to find a journalist through software and pitch them, right? And once they gave me some money, I'm all right, that's some validation. I wasn't 100% there. I don't know. I haven't even built a product yet. They can't even talk about product market fit. And then afterwards, I built a little bit of the product, and then I said I'm going to charge a little more, and then see if that's going to keep flying that way. And essentially kept going that way, charging and seeing if people are satisfied with what I've built, and keep getting feedback from them.
Yeah. I don't know if there's a single guideline or single set of KPIs. It'll have to be dependent on the business. But what I would always, there are two things that I would always call out. One is that definitely draw a line if you're starting. If this is your week one, and you have a business model. Within your business model somewhere, you have to draw a line to say, if I were to get my first 100 customers, and out of those 100 customers, if 30 came back in a 2-month time frame, to repurchase whatever, I was selling, depending on the kind of product. Of course, if it's a, streaming platform, then you expect X percentage to keep coming back at least twice a week and so on. And assume that Y percentage of that are actually going to bring at least one more friend alongside, or Z percent of that are going to leave a feedback saying that they actually loved the experience. So in whichever tactical and micro dimensions you want to define success and a product market fit, and you keep evolving from there. But it's very important to define that and not just look at the fact that, I had my first sale, or I had 100 people buy the product, hence I have a product market fit. Or there are 20 people who I met on the street, all used my product. They all loved it. They said, oh my God, it's aesthetically so beautiful, and I love the experience, and I have a product market fit. See, that's the fallacy. Because it's not a single dimension that can prove that you have a product market fit. It has to be, across multiple dimensions, from repeatability, return purchase, the brand love, and so on. The second element, which I think you kind of hinted at, is there is no single path. There is no one single direction for any startup. It's not a marathon where you can actually see where you're headed. So you may very well be running at 100 miles an hour. In fact, you have to run at 100 miles an hour. The key is your ability to repivot. So you could be running at 100 miles an hour, but you have to have the ability to pause, repivot the very next week, especially as a startup. Like you may, and that's the fallacy, that's the challenge as a founder, because you get so attached with your idea that it's really tough for you to convince yourself that, no, that isn't the right path. Because you're investing not only a dollar and the effort, not only investment, but you're investing your heart and soul into that idea, into that direction. But the ones who are able to repivot, every X number of days and challenging themselves, is this the right path, and really over-scrutinizing their thinking, they are the ones who are ultimately able to get to a product market fit at some point. So I almost think about, this is a guerrilla warfare where there is no predefined straight line. You almost have to keep zigzagging until you find, for your ultimate core audience, yes, I have proven scale, I have proven repeatability, and I have proven some sort of brand love and brand affinity.
Yeah. We've done that a lot in my business because we started out as purely software, realized that PR is controlled by so many factors. There's the journalists who are going to publish, there's like the pitch that needs to go out from the startup, and just having software didn't do it justice,
Yep.
right? And so we had to pivot again to do like a little bit of services to help people along this path, like write the email pitch, how do you send it, track it, figure out what to do with it when people don't respond. And then we added services on, and then we didn't want to be a services agency, and so we kept pivoting a lot during these 4 years to try and like move to that level.
And what's interesting is we all talk about the product market fit. Of course, I've been talking about this here, but it's almost like that state of happiness. It's like you can reach there, but you're never guaranteed to stay there.
Yeah.
Because the world around us and the environment and the ecosystem is evolving so fast now, being disrupted not only by the technology but by the consumer themselves, that once you've reached there, you almost have to work harder to stay there.
Right.
Because until, and I use this example a lot, like until 2 years back, everybody was still focused on a mobile first experience and how mobile, was an extension of our lives. Come voice, in less than 12 months, starting to become, main stage and rather getting closer to being a commodity. And now suddenly, mobile is disruptive. Mobile is friction, where now it has to be voice. So anybody who felt, well, that is the product market fit, I have a great experience, now has to think about a whole different ballgame.
Right. Voice. I just had lunch with Brian Dean. He runs a blog called Backlinko. He's pretty knowledgeable in SEO, and he's just did this huge voice study about all these different voice commands, like millions and millions of voice commands, to see how they rank, because voice search is now becoming like a big thing. In terms of retention, that's the other thing that you were mentioning on delighting a customer to a point that you are continuously retaining this customer. When I interviewed Dan Martell, I interviewed a lot of folks, he had this thing that he said, you gotta get to that aha moment, right? You gotta get to that aha moment for a customer. Just center on that one, focus on that one aha moment, and just repeat that over and over and over and over and over again. Just focus on that, and then the rest will kind of come. And so I was like, all right, in my case, like, it's PR, so it's like the aha moment is like the guy got published, or the company or whoever, the CEO got published on this blog or the publication of Forbes. That's the aha moment. It's like, all right, we got to keep repeating that. It's like a tough promise to make. But a lot of people, I guess, think of retention as these email campaigns, reminders, these kind of like gentle nudges. I don't know. Like, I think of Spotify, and I think of these like emotion-based playlists that they created like years ago, which would like invoke feelings, and they would be married towards like working out or like hang out with your friends, or like mood-based kind of like, those kind of lists. So I was like, oh, and I would get reminders of like, you felt this way on Sunday or whatever. So how do you think of I guess, retaining customers and getting to that point where you think you're doing a good job at your retention. Your churn rate is rather low. Like, I've been at it for like 2 years now, just chipping away my churn rate, right? I did something crazy. I did the worst thing ever. I did this big promotion on like a Groupon type of site on AppSumo, right? And it wasn't bad. Like, I got good promotion, except I got all these people who are just sitting there looking for the next deal to sign up on my site, pay me money, and actually become a paying customer, but they were not the right customer, right?
Yeah.
So I had like chipped away at all these people, right? I got my churn rate down to like single digits. I think I'm feeling good about it. Yeah. And I talked to other marketers and really smart people, like people that lead, like done amazing things, and everybody's got their own little kind of like way to think about retention. Everybody's got tricks on like how to retain people. I haven't found like a holistic piece of advice I can give people about retention ever, really, or for myself. So I was like, retention is still like this ghost for me.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to solve that problem for you today, but there is one advice that I will give, which I'm sure everybody will agree is, oftentimes when we're talking about growth, people talk about growth hacking, people talk about acquisition. We talk about, of course, everything Airbnb did with Craigslist and so on. But if there is one challenge when it comes to growth, it is retention. Right, you can buy your way into acquisition, into bringing the users, but you have to earn the right to retain them. And I almost say you can buy a date, but you cannot buy love. And I think that is where retention is. But I'll go back to the first point you made about the aha moment. Of course, that became pretty big when Chamath and the first sort of growth team at Facebook came up with I think it's 7 friends in 10 days or 10 friends in 7 days. But I think while the philosophy makes a lot of sense, a lot of times people get stuck in the correlated aha moment. And it's not easy to identify the true causal aha moment. It requires a lot of experimentation, a lot of analysis. And you're fortunate if you can identify what that aha magic moment is. And then, yes, you can try to remove all sorts of friction in getting your users to that aha moment in the fastest and the shortest possible way. And yes, I think everybody knows the playbook. It's the execution of that playbook that is still, a bit of a mountain to climb. But outside of that, let's assume that, yes, everyone is in our own process to identify that aha moment. But I think beyond that, to me, retention happens at the intersection of a great product experience, great messaging, and surfacing tremendous immersive and personalized and relevant storytelling and content. It's not one or the other, right? So you can have a brilliant product, but if you're not reaching out to that user, when they're off platform, or when they aren't thinking about you, to your point, sort of nudging them, in those right moments and bring them back to the platform, give them enough reason to come back to the platform, you're not helping them build the habit. So it's not only a brilliant product, but the right message at the right time through a touch point where you believe you may find that user. And that, again, underlies a lot of experiments, because there is no single definition to say what kind of message, what kind of content is going to work for every single kind of user. I also feel sometimes people think they're doing CRM, they're sending emails, they're sending messages, hence they are doing retention. Or hence, so-called CRM and customer relationship, as we've all grown up calling it. There's a lot that needs to go underneath. There's a lot that needs to go into understanding who your audience is to begin with, what their needs are. Because if you have 100 users, at least 50 of them will have very distinct needs. Some of them are going to come, looking for a certain type of product based on where they live and, what kind of household they have, versus somebody else who's looking for very, value-focused utility from that piece of product. So how you talk to them is also very different. And one of the things that I've seen, especially in tech companies that focus so much on monthly active users, daily active users, MAU to DAU ratio, is we're always looking at a lot of these lagging indicators, more North Star KPIs. We invest less in understanding the health of those users. in understanding user states. In user states being defined in terms of the engagement level. And how do you apply some of that science to figure out what is the right time to intercept, with something more compelling to perhaps bring them back one more time. So it's art and science. There is no single definition. And one last thing that I always say is retention is also a symptom of who you acquire, right? So you can't blindly keep acquiring users, open the floodgates and assume that you're going to retain them all alike. Because sometimes if you're acquiring users who shouldn't have been here in the first place, you bleed twice, because you will first bleed in terms of in trying to acquire users, who should not have been users of your platform or your product. Two, if you end up acquiring them because you have all the money, then you try to spend more money and bleed again, trying to retain them when they didn't want to be here in the first place.
Yeah, Rand Fishkin, who is also a speaker at Growth Marketing Conference, he wrote a book, Lost and Founder, and in the book talks about acquiring users, and he did a couple of these like big campaigns where he just basically tried to promote, like discount his software and do a big promotion and just work this landing page, and ended up getting a lot of same kind of like customers that I got when I ended up acquiring a whole bunch of people that just wouldn't stick around at all. Do you have any examples from your, I guess, career, marketing, advising, working with startups where people have messed up acquiring users, product market fit, retention, or any kind of...
Obviously, there's a lot published about Spotify, so I won't get a lot into what we are doing there, because there's a lot of work that we're doing both across product marketing and content to continuously improve our retention rates. But there's one example that I always remember, because whether it's acquisition or retention, I firmly believe everything begins from your understanding of the audience, your understanding of your core target. And as marketers or as professionals, we all believe we understand the consumer, and I always call the consumer her, because she's the protagonist everywhere in our personal lives and outside as well. But I think we all believe we understand them, but we really don't, because our understanding of the consumer is extremely fragmented. So a few years back, I had a beautiful opportunity to work on a Fortune 100 incontinence brand, where we had a brilliant product, because the company created the category itself. It was incontinence for the adults, 55, 60 plus, and invested a lot in research and development. So it was an offline product, so unlike a tech online digital native product. And in our second year, we realized the growth wasn't there, and we kept improving the product. We kept launching new campaigns, new ideas, and we finally invested in behavioral science to understand the causality of why people weren't buying. And it was very interesting that we found out it wasn't as much about a lack of awareness. It wasn't about lack of trust. It wasn't about lack of trial. It was actually because of stigma associated with the category itself. That consumer who's 55 plus and 60 plus is not a digitally native consumer, so is not really making a purchase on a mobile phone. They're actually walking down the aisle to make that purchase, and they don't want to be seen in that aisle trying to buy an incontinence product, because it's kind of embarrassing. So to me, that was a big lesson learned, because that taught me so many things, that a lot of times when you're in a startup or in a big massive organization, we are all still very inside out. We all believe that we understand the human. We all believe we understand the needs and the barriers, where we rarely do. And that is where you have to apply the science to hope that you understand what the consumer needs are. And many times, most times, those consumer needs aren't obvious. They don't come out of in a focus group. They will not come out of a survey response, because we know consumers, as all of us as human beings and consumers, we don't think, feel, and do. You do, feel, and then you think. So what I'm responding to you in a questionnaire is not really driving my decisioning when I'm in my real world making those decisions. So to me, that is a fundamental premise. Of course, there are a lot of tactics we can all share about how you acquired your next 1 million and 100 million users, or how you move your retention rate, from day 60, day 30, from this percentage point by that percentage point. But ultimately, what I believe in is how much are you applying your understanding of the user, the causal understanding of the user, to your product, to your messaging, to your content.
That's really insightful. The Rand Fishkin, again, in his book, I just reread it twice because my wife has covered his swap. He did a CEO swap with Will Reynolds, the Seer Creative.
Sure.
And in that book, have you read the book yet? No? You sure? It's so good. Like, it's just so revealing. Like, he talks about everything, like how much he earns and like how much, like the worst company meeting and just the worst board meeting, like the worst mistakes, really, and really what to learn from them, like just like lessons learned. Unlike any other startup book that I've read. And so so he talks about this idea where he really didn't know his customers and that well. He thought he did. He was a SEO marketing guy before. And then when he switched that role, the 2-week, and my wife covered that switch. She wrote for Wired. And he went and worked at Seer Creative, which is an SEO company. He was running basically a software company, right? This services company was using his product, and now he looked and saw how people were actually using this product, along with other competitors, Ahrefs or whichever, like the SEMrush, whatever it was at that time, and he saw that these people were doing something completely different from how he thought they were supposed to be doing this. And he actually, up until that point, hasn't really, he's done SEO projects, but he hasn't like worked in the field with other professionals trying to use tools, right? He just used his own tools and he had his own thing. And so that opened up his, it was a crazy experience because he was like living, and I think he was having lunch with Will's wife or something. Like he walked Will's dog. Like it was just crazy. But aside from that, it was an eye-opening experience. He came back. He's like, I'm going to have to work with more professionals to see how they use these products and what their motivations are for using different products and why. And to that behavioral science point, it's just like something that I think a lot of people don't think about. I feel like people are just clicks, growth, and that famous HubSpot unicorn example is in the back of everybody's mind. It's like, just growth, man. Like just growth and IPO, growth and IPO. Like investors are happy. I'm doing my job. We got like a meeting going on, growth and IPO. Sure, we'll do some surveys. Sure, we'll talk to some customers. But digging deep into that mind is like, it's just tough usually, and it's like it sets everybody back a little bit. Product is now not pushing ahead anymore as fast because now we're like assessing whether we should be putting in new product features, what's going on. So I feel like a lot of people don't do that.
I think that's one of the most common things I've noticed, because we have, especially if you're a founder, you have such set belief in what you're trying to build, and every single day the belief gets stronger and stronger because you're thinking about it so much that you almost forget who is it for, and the why behind the what you're building, and that very quickly becomes a big bottleneck. Like there was this a brilliant startup that I'm now sort of connected with through Techstars in Chicago, and they have a great idea about sort of this second kitchen model for bars that don't really have their own kitchen, and they're focusing on customers who are just walking in, thinking that, not knowing that they can actually have food in this bar. And in our first conversation, I asked a very simple question: out of the 10 customers who are walking in, how many of them are actually already made a dinner plan getting into the bar? It's a very simple question you would ask, right? So, but a lot of the teams aren't always thinking about that as the first question. Is even when big organizations think about total addressable market, which has been the biggest cliched metric that every organization from Fortune 1,000 and 10,000 to Fortune 100 have used, there's a lot of misconception in that total addressable market, because that is only telling you how many users have the right to be your customer. But how many users you have the right to win right now has a lot of limiting factors. So how do you translate that total addressable market into somewhat of a current addressable market that you have the right to win in the next 6 to 9 to 12 months is a whole different ballgame. But when you think, in order for you to think about that, the current addressable market size, you have to start to slice and dice the audience to ultimately land on who do you have the right to win, and then you start to tailor your product for that core audience. Then you start to get behind the why, the why behind what they are doing. Why are they coming? And the ones who aren't coming, why they aren't coming? Or the ones who are going away, why are they going away compared to the ones who came and they stayed? Right? So that is a lot of the causal analysis that is key. Otherwise, you just keep on the spiral of hidden trial.
At Growth Marketing Conference and other conferences and in the blogs, we get pushed growth hacks. We get pushed things that are just, let's grow, let's push marketing, and sitting back as marketers, like thinking about, the psyche of our users and figuring out behavior, figuring out how that relates to your retention or maybe even product market fit is so healthy as a startup. It's just a lot of startups can't or won't want to afford to.
Because you're hungry.
You're hungry.
You just want to go.
Yeah.
Right? Because there are a few users knocking at the door, so you just want to open the door, let them in.
So your competitors are doing it. Like, they're going after your users.
Yes.
You can't sit back and study user behavior. You gotta go. You got like 5 million, 3 million in you. You got like a board meeting lined up, and they're like, all right, we're looking at your growth rate here. It's 40%, 30%. What's going on?
Yeah.
Do you need like a better marketing person? Like the investors, is there like...
the founders I feel are successful or have much higher probability of being successful are the ones who are saying no to that door knock, to say, no, that's not core to what I'm trying to build right now in this current phase of, I call it the startup phase where I'm still very early on. They are the ones who are able to really focus and get to the product market fit sooner than anybody else. But one of the other things, Dmitry, that I've struggled with in every single experience that I've had with marketing is this, especially if you're a startup where you have deficit of investment and money, and depending again, are you Series A, are you self-funded, even worse, is this constant challenge and question to pick, should I invest in building the brand? And that little $100 that I have, should I invest in building my brand, building the trust, and invest in showing that how I'm culturally connected, or should I invest more in pure growth, pure performance to acquire the users, to retain them? And that tussle exists in every organization. Doesn't matter who you are. And as you grow into bigger and bigger organization, I think every single marketing function, every single CMO is now being held accountable for outcomes, no longer the output. And I think that is a fundamental shift that marketing has gone through in the last few years, where thanks to data, thanks to technology, marketing is now held accountable for tangible business impact. But as a startup, you have this conundrum to say, hey, but nobody knows about my brand. Nobody knows about my product. So how am I going to bring the first 500 or the first 1,000 customer? Well, I have to first create awareness. But I only have $100. So what should I do? Should I put that $100 in creating that awareness? And then I have nothing left to bring them through, because most of the acquisition channels, are pretty much pay for reach, pay for play. Yeah. And then, of course, you will hear everybody say, well, paid media sucks. Performance marketing sucks. Just build network effects in your product. Build organic loop. But they aren't that easy to build on the get-go. And especially if you're an e-com platform. It's not that easy. You still have to bring and hope that you get the first initial user base somehow. Then you start to embed some network effects initially in your thinking, in your product design, and you'll lose. But there's no simple answer. But I would hope that every founder is at least conscious about it. They're not blind to it. They're not blindly spending on one side or the other, because this is not separated anymore. Like in my head, I can never separate the growth of the brand from the growth of the user base and the growth of the user value. To me, those are three concentric circles where every bubble or every circle amplifies the impact of the other. You can only go this far without a strong brand. And you can only invest in a strong brand up until, you're not able to demonstrate the quantitative impact to business growth and retention and lifetime value of the user.
These are all great points. I feel like anybody who's listening to this should at least remember that, digging deeper into why you're doing what you're doing, who your customers are, and thinking about, how are these customers going to continue using your product, and measuring your results are things that are important to whatever you do, whatever tactic you'll learn, in this, at the conference, or whatever you do day to day now. These things you should think back about. Maybe take a day out of the week, sit and think of efforts you've done, what you've accomplished so far. Decision making. I feel like if it was easier, more people would do it, maybe, or if there was some kind of easier framework or tools or something that just lets a founder or allows or eases the process for a marketing function to sit back and just say, all right, this is what we got to do, man. We got to look at the decision mechanism of our users, or how they're going to be making decisions when they're using our product. If there was some kind of thing, everybody's just looking for another case study, look at who look at this company that did this, we should be doing that, or I've just heard of this great thing that this other company did. And it's just because it worked for them, what,
doesn't mean it's gonna work
doesn't
for you.
It's not a cool story, but you got to do your own thing.
Yeah, not everybody is going to be able to hack into Craigslist and grow, and grow the business.
Right.
But I think the fundamentals stay the same. And I think when I see the startups missing the fundamental, that's when it becomes more challenging. How many startups are really making decisions based on data? How many are truly data driven versus just saying data driven on the deck? How many are still making decisions out of gut in isolation? You still need your gut and your belief, but you need data to inspire it, right? So even if you have 100 users, 9 out of 10 startups aren't looking at the behavior of those 100 users. They aren't even saying, let me see who these 100 are, right? Because if I know who these 100 are, because the first answer is, well, that's not big enough. That's not scaled enough for me to create a hypothesis. But the key is, if you look at your first 100, you have a better chance of finding the next 100. Because there's a reason why these 100 came and the other, billions didn't come. Maybe if you analyze the first 100, maybe is a slightly directional perspective on who can you go after. And the beautiful thing is technology has advanced so much that you can now pretty much laser pick who you're targeting. You're no longer blind unless you choose to. And that's where I feel there's no dearth of data, there's no dearth of content anymore, regardless of the size of who you are. There's a dearth of application of all those things. There's a dearth of applying data, applying insights, or transforming data into insights. There's a dearth of applying technology, to reach the right audience, the right user with the right message. We have all these, it's everyone has a Ferrari or some sort of a Ferrari, but most of them are parked in the garage. We're still not driving them often enough.
Cool. Well, thanks for sitting down with me. Thanks for chatting a little bit about marketing. I'll outline some more of these tactics probably in the post together with the video, and you'll probably be talking about some of these things at the conference in December. But it's always fun to chat about marketing, smart people like yourself, and others that are just trying to solve this question of, how do I acquire customers? How do I keep them? And how do I, please my investors and my board and everybody else who's involved, my bosses. And I wanted to focus this one a little bit on what do you do with all this information, because it's crazy sometimes. It's overwhelming to to figure out what to do with all these different tactics everybody's throwing to you.
Amidst the chaos, yes. Well,
Amidst
thank
the
you.
chaos.
This is amazing. I appreciate the opportunity, Dmitry.
Cool. Well, we'll see you in December.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Cool. Thanks for coming out.